Hello, and welcome back to my small part of the realms. My name is Hailstone. Today we'll be going back into the realm of Elden Ring, one I have been nervous about doing a serious theory video in, but one I've wanted to do for a very long time. So please, if you will permit, sit back, relax, and let us begin. Oh, a Carrion Royal Knight. Your sort is quite rare these days. What is that? Ah, a missive from our Elden Lord. So you want to know about the horn scent of Anir Illume? Very well then, I'll tell you what little I know about them. We have been told many things by the Golden Order. Among these is its most strict founding principle, that Marika is the one true god. But in truth, this is nothing more than a lie come to fruition by devious acts, unmarred cruelty, and rivalry. One rather abysmal act that we have become aware of in the Land of Shadows is the prospect of sainthood and the ascension to become one. Now, I can't say I've ever been a fan of the Jar people that wander the lands between, collecting the dead in order to lay them to rest at the Erdtree. At least they are a decent folk, far more than the Jars in the Land of Shadows. Our Elden Lord came across a small village deep within the Banished Land. Bonny Village, a ghastly sort, filled to the brim with mounds of jars and near-naked butchers carving up the populace and stuffing them inside. There were only a few pieces of evidence that even began to tell what went on there. In particular, a residual spirit repeating what was once said long ago. This is what you were accorded to in life, Shaman. Get in the jar. Nigh sainthood awaits within. While perhaps not verbatim, this gives one a sickening indication of what went on here. A foul ritual conferred onto Bonny Village by an ordained caste of butchers in the ideals of a divine ritual. From what I can glean, these shaman were special individuals with the potential to become something greater, something divine. This ascension that would be given to them was done so forcefully. These ordained deacons wielding massive cleavers, severing and slicing apart chunks of large meat to be shoved into jars. Though before these jars were to be sealed, a terrible abuse would be performed. Those who could be potentially shaman were taken away and whipped, not as punishment, mind you, but as tools to reshape them. The whips used to transform these shaman were disgusting and ripe with disease. Woven with dirty bones and teeth, these would inflict insipid wounds on the shaman, though only enough to maim and wound them, never killing. Then, once the wounds would begin to heal, the shaman, broken in spirit and body, would be shoved into the jars full of succulent flesh, and then sealed away, hoping that the shaman's flesh would meld with the desiccated remains within, and one day produce a saint. I suppose this is where the current era myth of the Jar Warriors come from, that even they themselves believe, roaming the land to gather the remains of great warriors, so that they may become ones in turn. Though at the end of the day, I will admit, I do not know the true purpose of jars, or their use under the Golden Order, but if modern jars are obsessed with making and becoming great warriors, then of its past equivalents, what is a saint and the prospect of sainthood? Apparently, a small and peaceful village exists within the Land of Shadows, known as the Village of Shaman, which rests upon a field of flowers and a quiet forest nearby, though thoroughly abandoned aside from two things, a golden tree and a talisman of great holy radiance. This was Marika's home village, before she became a god. She blessed and left an offering at the lone stone figure at the base of the tree. This may imply that Marika was of this shaman line, if not one herself, perhaps mothered by the grandmother whose likeness is carved as the stone figure that rests under the tree. But, as the incantation tells, there was no one left to bless, no one left to hear, to confess to. Perhaps they were all stuffed into jars, abducted by the greater Pontonates to be turned into saints. But once more, what is a saint, and what is the prospect of sainthood? To answer this, I think we need to recognize one thing: why the Empyrean Milica came to the realm of Shadow. to divest himself of his flesh and sinful heritage, to do one thing, become a god, in the same way that Marika, his mother, did. I believe this aspect is the most important, as to become a god in these lands, wouldn't one have to be an Empyrean? This train of thought leads me to one revelation alone, that the Shaman are ones who are either Empyreans or have said potential to become one, and are shoved into jars to meld with strong harvested flesh, to ready them for sainthood, to become a god. The Hornsent of Anir Elum had access to a esoteric artifact, one that allowed access to godhood, the gate of divinity. The Hornsent were obsessed with the very notion of getting closer to divinity, closer to the life-flourishing crucible, but perhaps they were obsessed with the aspect of the storm more than anything else. For that is where the realm of the gods was, and they would use the aesthetic dancing lions to serve as divine messengers. I believe this was the driving force behind the cruel treatment of the shamans, as at one point I feel that Empyreans were once born under only extremely rare conditions, much like in the case of Milica or Melania, or in the case of the witch Rani merely having the potential to become one. But now I think the Hornsent had found a way to coax divine essence out of the most unworthy of candidates. As a result of their obsession with divinity, I believe that within the Hornsent civilization, a plethora of Empyreans and gods existed, each boasting a diverse power or trait that emanated from the crucible of life. Though this obsession would come with a price. As for however grand Anir Elum was, its dark rituals would affront one of its saints, in particular, the one we would come to know as Queen Marika. Truly, I am unaware, or I have been unable to figure what Queen Marika was during this time. Though whether she was one of the gods of the Crucible or merely an Empyrean matters little, as during this time, Messmer's Great Purge began, ravaging the surrounding lands with his forces and ungodly golems. Though in truth, as formidable as his flame was, certainly it would not be enough. I apologize for much of what is to follow, and may be truly nothing more than the art of contrivance, but to understand what was left behind, we must stitch it together. I believe Marika was not truly alone in the destruction of the Hornsent, but had a form of assistance in one and the allegiance of another. There is something that has perplexed me for a long time, something about Lord Radagon, and while his origins remain a mystery to me, I do know one thing about him. Radagon despised his red hair. At first, I thought it was due to Messmer's actions, but no, it's because of who Messmer's father was, the god of the fire giants, the fell god himself. Lord Nicola once spoke of the seduction and sinful betrayal of his mother, but to who and what we do not know. But I would think it would have to be one of the gods of the Crucible that held the highest rank, in particular the one who wielded the Elden Ring at the time, the fell god of the giants, who, to orchestrate the fall of the Hornsent, Marika seduced and fathered his child, her first, Messmer, who would wield a flame similar to the fire giants due to his heritage, and would secure an allegiance with another Empyrean, the Gloam-Eyed Queen, the wielder of the god-slaying Black Flame. I've always wondered what gods the Godskin apostles and nobles hunted, though what gods better than those who tormented not only the shaman Marika, but perhaps the saint who would be the Gloam-Eyed Queen herself. There are many scenarios I have played over and over in my head, wrestling with an undetermined truth. But I think ultimately Marika betrayed her lover, stealing the Elden Ring for herself, and using its authority to ordain the Golden Order and herself as its one true god, and then commenced a terrible and brutal purge against the Crucible and its people. With Messmer and his furnace golems bearing the likeness of the Fell God, they would torch the countryside, hunting down all those who participated in harming the shamans, while the Gloam-Eyed Queen and her children wielded the Black Flame, bringing death to the gods of the Crucible, while skinning and fashioning clothes from the former gods. I believe this would be a short-lived alliance, as once Marika would become a god, she would seal the Rune of Death, robbing the Gloam-Eyed Queen and her children of their power, and would cast away those she deemed as unworthy into the Land of Shadow. Though, regardless of her stolen power. She would be unable to banish the entirety of the old world into the realm of shadows, with remnants of the Black Flame and the Forge of the Giants being the most stark examples, with Marika spending a large portion of her reign waging a war with the Fell God and what remained of his kin. And yet, when the war came to an end, Marika couldn't fully destroy the Forge along with the Fell God, perhaps due to its divine power, instead having to rely upon a curse and a legion of fire monks to keep them contained. As with the Rune of Death sealed, the gods could no longer die, could they not? Now, all that's left of the gods of the Hornsent are mere remnants of the once mighty and wild crucible they once reflected. The greater Pontinents that once served a holy and just purpose were now reduced to nothing but scavenging through the few surviving villages, desperate to find a proper catalyst for a new god, endlessly filling jars to be stored in the freezing jails, hoping that one day a new saint will arise and alleviate their suffering. And perhaps it did work. We do know of one saint that our Elden Lord encountered on his journey. Saint Romina was found deep within the ruins of Rua, at one point a spanning civilization in its own right, now nothing more than a holy path to tread for those who would become saints. Romina seems to be among the absolute last of the saints, or possible Empyreans arriving at the former church, just as Mesmer burned it to the ground or after. Though what is clear is when Saint Romina arrived, she was denied godhood and instead found solace in the messengers of Scarlet Rot, and therefore embraced the twisted divinity, infesting the church and nearby tunnel with the decay and transforming herself into an abomination. Beyond this, I know little of the possible pantheon of gods of the Hornsent, of their hierarchy, or even their true roles within this society, but one thing is painfully obvious. They were obsessed with divinity regardless of the cruelty or sacrifice required. They would achieve it. Thank you for watching another one of my videos. I apologize if this outro sounds any different to normal. I lost a lot of my voice settings when my old computer died, and I have been unable to recall what I had them set at. So with that said, please have a great rest of your week.